The first time the water crossed my property line, I honestly thought it was a fluke. A heavy rain, clogged ditch, maybe bad luck. I live on the edge of an HOA-controlled neighborhood, but my land predates the development by decades. Sloped acreage, mature trees, natural drainage paths. Nothing fancy, but everything worked the way it always had. Until it didn't. After one overnight storm, I walked out to find standing water pooling where it had never pooled before. My gravel drive was half submerged. A storage shed sat in 3 inches of muddy runoff. The soil near my fence line looked freshly carved, like a small river had decided to reroute itself directly through my land. At first, I didn't jump to conclusions. I checked culverts. I checked the ditch along the road. Everything on my side was clear. Then I walked uphill toward the HOA neighborhood. That's when I saw it. Freshly disturbed soil. Brand new drainage piping. A neatly cut swale that absolutely had not been there a month earlier. The entire slope had been regraded, subtly, professionally, and very intentionally, so that stormwater now flowed straight off the HOA property and onto mine. I took photos. I took video. I pulled old satellite images for comparison. This wasn't erosion. This was construction. So, I did the reasonable thing. I emailed the HOA. 2 days later, I got a response from the HOA president herself. Short. Dismissive. Almost cheerful. She wrote that the HOA had made minor improvements to drainage to protect their homes and that any water on my land was natural runoff. She ended it with, "It's just rainwater." That line stuck with me. I replied calmly. I attached photos. I explained that the grading redirected flow, increased volume, and violated county drainage codes. I asked when permits were pulled. Her reply came fast. No permits were required, she said. The HOA had the right to manage water on its own property. And again, almost mockingly, she repeated it. It's just rainwater. A week later, another storm hit. This one was heavier. Water poured off the HOA slope like a spillway. It flooded my drive completely. The shed was now sitting in nearly a foot of water. Tools inside were ruined. The fence posts closest to the runoff began to lean as the soil washed away. That's when I stopped emailing and started documenting. I set up temporary cameras. I placed measuring stakes in the ground to track water depth. I recorded timestamps, rainfall totals, flow direction. I called the county and asked, very carefully, what the rules were for redirecting stormwater. The answer was simple. You can't send it to your neighbor. I requested an on-site inspection. The county engineer came out, walked the slope, took one look at the grading, and quietly said, "This didn't exist before, did it?"
No.
It didn't. He explained that redirecting runoff like this could cause downstream damage, erosion, and structural flooding. He also told me something important. Once notified, the HOA was legally responsible for any additional damage.
So I notified them. Formally.
Certified letter. Photos attached. Engineer referenced. Code sections highlighted. A week passed. No response. Then I saw her in person. The HOA president was standing at the edge of the slope with a contractor, pointing at my flooded land like it was an inconvenience. When she noticed me, she smiled. Not a polite smile. A smirk. "Still having puddles?" she asked. I told her the county was involved. I told her the runoff was illegal. I told her the damage was adding up. She shrugged. "It's just rainwater," she said again. That was the moment I realized she truly believed nothing would come back to her. She was wrong. After that conversation, I stopped hoping for cooperation. Everything about her tone made it clear she thought this was beneath her, beneath the HOA, beneath their lawyers, beneath any real consequences. To her, my flooded land was just collateral damage in the name of protecting the community. So, I switched strategies. Instead of arguing, I prepared. I hired a licensed civil engineer on my own dime, not someone recommended by the county, not someone tied to the HOA. An independent expert whose only job was to follow the water and tell the truth. He spent half a day surveying the slope, measuring elevations, checking soil compaction, and tracing the new drainage path. His conclusion was blunt. The HOA had intentionally altered the natural flow of stormwater. The volume and velocity were increased. The discharge point was aimed directly at my property. And if left unchanged, it would continue to cause progressive damage with every major rain event. In plain terms, they built a flood aimed at me. He put it all in writing. Diagrams. Before and after grading maps. Flow arrows. Code violations cited line by line. The report was devastating and undeniable. I sent a copy to the HOA board. Every member. Certified mail. Still nothing. Then the weather forecast changed. A slow-moving storm system was coming in. Not a flash storm. Worse. 2 days of steady rain. The kind that saturates the ground, overwhelms drainage, and exposes every bad decision made with a bulldozer. I notified the county again. I notified my insurance. I made sure everything was logged. Then I waited. When the rain started, I didn't sleep much. I watched the cameras instead. Within hours, water began pouring off the HOA slope exactly as predicted. The measuring stakes climbed inch by inch. The ditch overflowed. The runoff carved deeper channels through my land, pulling soil and gravel with it. But something else happened too. The ground beneath the HOA's own drainage system began to saturate. The soil near the discharge point turned dark and spongy. Water started backing up, because when you force water downhill unnaturally, it doesn't always obey. By the second night, the storm drains uphill were struggling. Water pooled where it hadn't before, near the homes closest to the grading work, including hers. I didn't touch anything. I didn't block anything. I didn't alter a single structure. I simply watched what gravity did when pushed too far. At 2:17 a.m., one of my cameras caught a new flow direction. Water that had nowhere else to go began finding the lowest available opening uphill. A basement window well. Her basement window well. The next morning, my phone exploded. Messages from neighbors. Photos. Videos. Someone sent me a clip of water pouring down her basement stairs like a waterfall. Another showed soaked drywall stacked on the curb. I recognized the contractor vans. Flood remediation companies don't show up unless things are bad. Very bad. Later that afternoon, I saw her again. This time, she wasn't smirking. She stood in her driveway, arms crossed, staring at a dumpster filled with ruined carpet, cabinets, and furniture. The smell of wet insulation hung in the air. Fans roared inside the house. I didn't say a word.
She did.
"This is ridiculous," she snapped. "My basement is destroyed." I looked at the slope, the pipes, the swale. "It's just rainwater," I said. She froze. That was the first crack. The first moment she realized her own words had weight. By evening, the HOA board called an emergency meeting. By the next day, insurance adjusters were involved. By the end of the week, the county posted a notice of violation on the grading site. And quietly, very quietly, the HOA hired lawyers. Because now, the flood didn't look like an accident anymore. It looked like cause and effect. And the paperwork was just getting started. Once lawyers entered the picture, the tone changed fast. The HOA's attorney sent a letter claiming the flooding of her basement was an act of nature, completely unrelated to the drainage work. According to them, the rain event was unprecedented, the damage was unavoidable, and any connection to their regrading was speculative. That argument might have worked if there hadn't been evidence. I forwarded the engineer's report. I attached the county's preliminary findings. I included timestamp video showing the water flow before the grading, after the grading, and during the storm. 3 versions of the same slope. One obvious difference. Silence followed. Then the county escalated. A second inspection was scheduled, this time with a senior engineer and an environmental compliance officer. They walked the site, measured again, and reviewed the HOA's lack of permits. They also examined the president's property, specifically the basement. The conclusion was unavoidable. The redirected runoff overloaded the system. The water had nowhere to go. It backed up and entered the lowest available structure. Her basement. The county issued a formal violation notice to the HOA for illegal alteration of stormwater drainage, failure to obtain permits, and downstream damage. Fines were assessed. Corrective action was ordered. And then came the insurance fallout. Her homeowner's insurance denied the claim. The reason was simple and brutal. The damage resulted from unpermitted construction and intentional grading changes. It wasn't covered. The estimated repair cost, drywall, flooring, electrical, mold remediation, was just over $50,000. She appealed. She lost. The HOA's master insurance policy didn't help either. Their carrier cited gross negligence and unauthorized work. No coverage. That's when the finger-pointing started. At the next HOA board meeting, voices were raised. Emails leaked. One board member asked, on record, why the drainage work was approved without permits. Another asked why homeowner complaints were ignored. A third asked why the president had personally directed the contractor. The room turned on her. She tried to deflect, saying the work was necessary, that she was protecting the community. But the engineer's diagrams were on the screen behind her. Blue arrows showing water flowing off HOA land. Red arrows showing damaged paths. You can't argue with arrows. Residents began to ask harder questions. How many other homes were now at risk? What if the water shifted again?
Who would pay next time?
The county's answer was clear. The HOA was responsible for restoring natural drainage and preventing future harm. That meant removing the grading, rerouting the pipes, rebuilding the slope correctly, at significant cost. Special assessments were proposed. That's when the outrage exploded. Homeowners who had no flooding, who had benefited from the drainage changes, were now being told they might have to pay thousands to undo them. And all of it traced back to one decision, made without oversight. Her decision. The board called for a vote to suspend her authority pending investigation. She objected loudly. The vote passed anyway. Within days, contractors were back, not to improve anything but to reverse it. Trenches were filled. Pipes were removed. The slope was reshaped to its original contour. And slowly, the water stopped coming. As for me, I filed my own claim. Property damage, erosion, loss of use, equipment replacement. This time, the HOA's lawyer didn't dismiss it as just rainwater. They asked for a settlement meeting. Because by now, everyone understood something important. The flood didn't start in the storm. It started with arrogance. And arrogance leaves a paper trail. The settlement meeting was nothing like I expected. Instead of bravado or legal threats, the HOA's attorney showed up with a thick folder and a very careful tone. The president wasn't there. That alone said more than any opening statement ever could. They didn't deny what happened. Not anymore. They acknowledged the illegal grading. They acknowledged the county violations. They acknowledged the engineer's report. What they wanted now was containment, financial, reputational, and legal. They offered to cover my direct damages if I agreed to sign a mutual release and stay quiet. I declined. Not because I wanted revenge, but because the damage wasn't just financial. My land had been altered. Soil had washed away. Drainage patterns were destabilized. And most importantly, the HOA had shown a pattern of ignoring consequences until they personally felt them. I wanted guarantees. Permanent restoration of the slope. Third-party inspections. Written confirmation filed with the county. And compensation for future mitigation if the problem resurfaced. The attorney asked for a break. When they returned, the offer changed. They agreed to everything. Because by then, the internal situation inside the HOA had completely unraveled. Homeowners were furious. Not just about the flooding incident, but about the special assessments being discussed behind closed doors. Emails leaked showing the president had overridden concerns from other board members. One message explicitly stated, "We don't need permits, it's our land." That sentence made its way to the county. The investigation widened.
Past projects were reviewed.
Landscaping changes. Retaining walls. Drain modifications. Suddenly, inspectors were everywhere, asking uncomfortable questions. And the HOA president? She stopped attending meetings altogether. A formal recall petition circulated. It didn't take long. More than enough signatures were collected in a single weekend. An emergency vote was scheduled. She showed up for that one. No smirk this time. No confidence. Just anger, thinly masked by exhaustion. Homeowners lined up to speak, one after another. Some were polite. Some were furious. All of them pointed to the same issue. Decisions made without transparency, without permits, without respect for consequences. When it was time to vote, the result wasn't close. She was removed. Effective immediately. Her authority was revoked. Her access to HOA accounts was terminated. And the board appointed an interim president before the meeting even ended. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The same person who once waved off flooding with its just rainwater had lost her position because water doesn't lie. A week later, the HOA finalized the settlement with me. They paid for the damage. They funded long-term erosion control. They recorded easements ensuring drainage compliance. Everything was documented, signed, and filed. And quietly, very quietly, they reimbursed her basement repairs. Not because they had to, but because she threatened to sue them. That lawsuit never went anywhere. The documents were too clear. The evidence too strong. The blame too obvious. She eventually sold her house. The $50,000 basement remodel, ripped out and redone, then disclosed in the listing. The price dropped. The buyers negotiated hard. I watched the for sale sign go up for my driveway. By then, my land was dry again. The soil had stabilized. Grass was growing where runoff once carved channels. The water had returned to its natural path. Quiet, predictable, harmless. But the lesson lingered. Rules don't stop mattering just because you're in charge. Physics doesn't care about authority. And dismissing damage doesn't make it disappear. It just delays the bill. And sooner or later, that bill always comes due. In the final section, I'll tell you what this taught me about HOA's power and why documenting everything can change the outcome completely. After everything settled, after the inspections ended, and the lawyers stopped calling, the property felt quiet again. Not just physically, emotionally. No standing water. No emails. No tension every time clouds rolled in. But the experience stayed with me. For a long time, I replayed that first interaction in my head. The smirk. The shrug. The casual way she dismissed real damage with 4 words. It's just rainwater. That sentence captured something deeper than arrogance. It showed how power can distort perspective, how being in charge can make people forget that rules, laws, and consequences still apply. HOAs, at their core, are supposed to manage shared responsibilities. Roads. Common areas. Maintenance. But somewhere along the way, some boards start confusing authority with immunity. They assume that if they vote on something internally, it becomes untouchable. That if a homeowner complains, it's just noise. This situation proved the opposite. Every major turning point came from documentation. Photos, video, measurements, reports, certified letters. Not emotions, not arguments, evidence. When the county got involved, they didn't care who she was. They cared where the water went. When the insurance companies reviewed the claim, they didn't care about intentions. They cared about permits and causation. When the board turned on her, it wasn't personal. It was financial and legal survival. Water was just the messenger. I've had neighbors ask me if I regret how far it went. If I wish I'd just worked it out quietly. The truth is, I tried. I reached out early. I gave warnings. I gave opportunities to fix it before it escalated. Dismissal is what escalated it. If there's one lesson I'd pass on to anyone dealing with an HOA or any authority structure, it's this: calm persistence backed by evidence is more powerful than confrontation. You don't have to raise your voice. You don't have to threaten. You just have to be prepared. Know your codes. Know your rights. Document everything. Because once something is written down, once it's timestamped and verified, it stops being a disagreement and becomes a fact pattern. And facts don't care about smirks. As for her, I don't take any pleasure in what happened. Losing a role, dealing with financial stress, selling a home. None of that is a victory. It's simply the outcome of choices made without accountability. I drive past that house, sometimes. New owners. New landscaping. The basement window wells are higher now. Proper drains installed. Everything up to code. Ironically, the fixes she refused to make early on are now permanently in place. My land is healthier too.
The slope restored.
Native grass holding soil. Drainage flowing where it always should have. What was once a problem became an improvement because it was forced to be done correctly. And that's the quiet ending to all of this. No shouting match. No dramatic courtroom scene. Just a clear chain of cause and effect. She said it was just rainwater. She was right about one thing. It was only water. But water follows gravity, not authority. And when you try to force it onto someone else, it eventually finds its way back.